Hello,
Hello, how are you? Good to see you again, sir.
sir. Morning, can you hear me?
I can. Can you hear us?
Yes, I can. Loud.
Excellent, excellent. All right, good, good. So, just we have the folks joining us. Maybe give it another minute or two for stragglers. I'd like to wait a couple minutes. 11. It's 11-ish for starting time. Let's let
Sure.
folks get in here. And I want to, in the meantime, I'm going to fix one thing on my screen so I can actually get questions while I'm talking with you, which would be helpful. Drag this over here. All right, so, and I'll get the. All right, so we've got folks starting to join us. Huzzah. What I like too about this topic and this group is that it's global. We've got a really good list of attendees coming in from interesting organizations around the planet. So they'll be bringing in their perspectives, their kind of questions, and their particular crises they're going through, depending on where they are. Which it's sort of the standard mode for a lot of folks in HR. What fire is happening now? How do I fix it? And oh my God, what's that smell? What else is burning? But it's different kind of fire depending where you are, obviously, too. All right. So, got a raised hand here, looks like. Maybe not. I saw a hand go up and go down. All right. Let's kind of start rolling into the intros. It's 11:03. Do you want to get a couple of minutes? Do you want to get going, or what are your thoughts?
Get going.
Okay, let's start doing this. So, yeah, I just it's just for housekeeping. We're recording the session. Everyone out there, and we'll have a copy available afterwards for you. During the actual session, we'll have some polls coming out, just a couple easy ones around the topic du jour, HR, data and utilization, security, that kind of fun stuff. But to get the intros going, so I like the title because I'm a nerd, but HR data and strategic workforce and complex economies. I just think it sounds kind of cool, and it is relevant because there's a lot going on right now globally, as we all know, and a lot of change happening too. And so let me read off my notes here. So I'm looking down at my notes. Apologize for that. So I'm Martin Burns. I can remember that much about myself. I'm with Udder. I'm one of our leaders. I've been doing this for a long time in the industry. Yeah, but in topics like this, I prefer to have actual experts who know what they're talking about, talking versus myself, because I can just be glib and make things up and possibly get you in trouble down the road. So I'm just here as your host with the most, managing things. What we have, though, are two real experts. So Dr. Hallie Bregman and Maor Hen. So Hallie and I'm just reading my notes here real quickly because I want to make sure I'm correct. She's a expert data analytics, doing this for both on the practitioner side as well as on the consulting side. Really likes looking at data in HR and how it interacts and what you can pull out of it and how you can utilize it. That's a quick summary, I think, of Hallie. She'll do more on her own and do better than I can. We also have Maor Hen from HiBob. He is global director of compensation and benefits. Did I get that correctly?
Yes, indeed. And also actually the
Close
HR,
enough. Okay,
which is Bob, of course. Yeah, it is correct.
Okay, yeah, of course, yeah. So HiBob is a really awesome and phenomenal HRIS. It's global, based out of Tel Aviv, strong presence in EMEA and globally, and scaling. They do a lot of things that I think are pretty fantastic. Mayor with his role being not only with an HRIS provider but also being their internal expert. That's a double-edged sword that I like. That came across the wrong way. That's a dual skill set that I like and experience. And just thought having these two together in a conversation on this topic would be really kind of exciting and useful for the community, and a chance for me selfishly to learn a bit more about the topic while I can listen to these two. You kind of walk through who they are, what they do. So as I said, we're looking at a couple of things. This is a rough agenda, just high level for me. It's from talking with Maor and Hallie, but understanding HR data and utilization, what it is, what it looks like, what it actually means. Looking at data privacy, security, how do you manage that? Also, strategic workforce planning. I'm just looking at my words because I stutter if I'm not reading them. Strategic workforce planning. just exploring that piece of it. How do you actually use data to understand how to look at the future, right? And then we'll have a Q&A session at the end. 2 quick polls will go out during it, and they are very quick, 3-4 questions, just to level set a bit from the audience, understand what you're looking at, and who you are, and help us sort of understand what question we should be looking at and then talking about during the actual webinar. So those will pop out during the webinar. I won't just do it randomly. I'll let you know. For just a quick icebreaker, I did a couple sort of flash survey questions out there before the webinar, just asking folks in the industry. We're doing this topic. What do you want to hear about? What's valuable? A couple came back. People are struggling with integrating data from too many systems. That was a very common complaint. They have data sitting everywhere, and how do they actually pull it together? And how do you even start doing that? That came up multiple times. Employee data security came across a bunch too. How do you balance security with pulling data and planning? How do you not go to prison and do your job at the same time? That's my paraphrase. No one said that, but it's always my concern. And then and how do you actually measure ROI out of HR data systems? How do you actually understand the reason we're investing all this money into these data systems, into this analytics? How do we justify paying for it? What's the actual end result? How do we tell the CFO, I want to buy this because it'll save you money down the road, or it'll make us more effective? How do you tell that story? So those came up quite a bit, just to kind of kick things off. But from there, really, I'd love to kind of get the 2 of you talking over some of those topics. I have other questions that have come through. I think a good one, I think, and this is more well so that I can say it. How do CHRs leverage data and insights to drive strategic business decisions that align with overall company goals? How do you do that? And maybe start from there. And Hallie's all excited.
Happens, right? No, it's that is a big meaty question, and I'll just start by prefacing there's no easy answer, right? I think we are working to equip our business leaders, our HR leaders, our business leaders with the right data to make better business decisions. And what I will generally say as kind of a field is we're very early on in this journey. So the use of data, right? You asked, in fact, coming from the audience, some really good tactical questions, right? Like, how do you manage security and things around those lines? How do you consolidate across systems? I think that just goes to show a little bit of where people's thinking at is first enabling the capability, right? How do we even get the data? How do we have the data? And then how do we use the data? And how do we use the data to help make business decisions? And so there's kind of a lot of steps there. So I always preface everything I say with like, you're not behind, because everybody I talk to tells me, oh, we're behind, right? Like, we're early on our journey, we're behind. And I'm like, you're not behind, right? We have aspirational goals, and I'll talk kind of a little bit about what you might be able to do with some of these insights. But I also just always reinforce that you can bite off a tiny piece and make movement instead of boiling the whole kitchen sink. So when it comes to really making business decisions, right, it's not just about turnover. It's not just about hiring. Those are really important levers that are often measured in the people space. And it's about how those types of metrics, and certainly there are others, compensation, obviously Maor can speak to more, that how they are all integrated. So I just want to give an example of the kind of thing you could do with this data. And so let's say customer satisfaction has dropped. Well, what does that have to do with people? Well, there could be a number of reasons customer satisfaction has dropped, right? It could be policy, it could be product, but it also could be that the frontline employees who are speaking with our customers are not well trained. And they're not well trained because there's really high manager turnover and really long onboarding time to get new managers, long time to fill, long time bringing those folks in. So there's nobody to do the training. So you have an employee base who can't serve the customers well, right? You can't answer that question customer satisfaction, is down Y without some of that people data, right? And you may be able to go in and look and be like, oh, actually, that's not it. It's something else. But you can't say that for certain until you've validated the hypothesis. And so those are the types of questions that I aspire for companies to be answering using this kind of information. So Maor, I'll let you jump in next, but lots to say there, certainly.
Yeah, definitely. So if I just relate to your last example, so yeah, of course, I would say probably the same. We all monitoring a lot of different metrics today. So turnover, attrition, voluntary attrition, cost of hire, time to hire. We're using engagement surveys. We're using how long did it take us to backfill those roles or any others. And on top of that, of course, there's always compensation as a big reason or a big fear. Maybe this is why we're not doing good these days. Maybe we're having some trouble to recruit. Maybe we have a lot of people leaving because of compensation. So I think that these days, where the market is really, crazy. 2 years ago, the market was so heat, you couldn't reach out to any employees. Everybody just kept going around. And at least here in Israel, and we feel it also in the UK and the US, the market has gone a bit down, and we're looking and see that people are not looking only for compensation. Mainly, people are looking today. It may be not strategically, it's not directly to analytics, but it might be because people, when we are doing the engagement survey, it's another analytics tool that we're dealing today. It's a magnificent tool. We see that employees are looking for not just compensation; they're looking for the entire package. They know to understand what is the employer value proposition. Do we have any flexibility? Do we care of our families, our belongings? Do I do even health insurance to take care of my employees? So I think that once you can combine the time to hire, cost of hiring, the attrition, the turnover, the ability even to analyze the leave reasons. So this is something that we are doing for the past 3 years. We're trying to analyze all the leave reasons and to make sure that where we are putting our effort, where are we doing wrong, what can we do better in order to make sure that we maintain and attract the top talents that we would like to have. And of course, on top of that, we're always doing the other part of compensation, making sure we are still competitive, yet we are still maintaining our budgeting, of course, our budget for those salaries, and make sure that we take at the end, we're going to the CFO, the CHRO, and we want to have those decisions. We have everything combined and not just reckless decisions or suggesting, okay, let's increase this salary or decrease this salary because of that. We want to come with the whole picture, and HR analytics definitely helps us to make a data-driven decision as we are doing in any other aspect of the company.
Great. So two things. I have a question off of that, and then we have questions come in from one of the attendees. So just what I'm curious about is, and Mayor, this is more of a tactical thing, I guess, because it is quite often tactical. Are you noticing a trend when it comes to attracting talent and what they look for in terms of their overall package? So, and across generations. And what I'm to frame a little bit, I'm wondering if someone's younger, early in their career, if their primary focus is the dollar figure or the pound figure, whatever, euro figure, we want to call it, the actual salary, whereas benefits are less important. Whereas someone farther along in life might say, hey, I'll take less because I need more health insurance, or I have kids now and I need tuition assistance. Do you see a shift in what they look for, what they focus on when you're recruiting? Is that, if you tease that out, or is that?
Yeah, you can see a lot of differentiation between the different generation, Gen X, Gen Z, boomers, or whatever it is. So of course, all of us, when we got a bit older, we want stability. We want to make sure that we have the whole package. We'll take care about, the career progression and maybe other stuff. What we see, the more young generation, they definitely would like to have more dollar value, as you said. They're looking for the base salary, maybe the variable commission, depends which role it is. While people who are getting a bit more mature, they're taking care about, I want to have a health insurance. I want to have some flexibility because I'm a father. I have a family. I need some time with them as well. I want to make sure that I don't have to walk, across the clock all day long. So we do see it. But I must say that, post-COVID, I think that most of even the young generation wants some stability. Although they want the money, they want stability. They want to make sure they're in a company. They won't fire them tomorrow just because they lost one or two business. They want to make sure it's a stable company they could stay with, because they're looking about maybe the near future, but it is a future. It's not a long-term future as other maybe. But that's what we feel. And we see lately, when option used to be maybe a more strong of a component, we see it a bit less than it used to be. Me as a private company, it's not public yet, so it's not RSUs. So if we used to have much more talk about, or we had more conversation about the options and how much do they worth, and how do you estimate them? And it seems like people are less curious about the options and prefer the base salary, as you said, the guaranteed salary.
It's comes down a lot to like the macroeconomic climate, right? And so I think you get a couple of trends out of that, right? You might be able to look at, say, exit surveys and see that Gen Zers are commenting on leaving far more often because of compensation than, boomers or whatever other tier it might be. Right now, turnover is at an all-time low. I think really globally. The macroeconomic market hit for the last couple of years has really just, again, increased everyone's need for stability. And that means people aren't taking the risk and leaving as often. We can think back to 2 years ago in the Great Resignation, how things have changed. But the other thing I would highlight in this conversation is region, right? And how things differ in different places. And so when you talk about, I don't know, let's just stick to turnover for a moment. There are places in I believe it's India and parts of EMEA that have different requirements when it comes to notice periods, when it comes to hiring expectations. And you might have much longer things like time to hire, or much longer kind of gaps as folks are leaving organizations. And those have big impacts both in compensation and budget structure, in time to hire and productivity, but also just highlight some of the regional differences. And what I like to say when it comes to many of these metrics is there's no one size fits all. You can't look at, I guess you could look at compa ratio. If you have really good bands, in your system regionally, then you could compare on that ratio. But you can't look at somebody paid in one region versus another. You can't look at time to hire in one region versus another, right? There are very different standards and also very different regulations around those data points.
So that's a great segue, because the question that came in was, how do we manage and track where our data is flowing and what legislation it falls under?
So
okay,
I am a legal expert, right? But I will say there's, this is hard. And so first you do an audit, and you do an audit of all your systems. So if you're really just trying to kind of like lay the groundwork, you're new, you don't have compliance in place yet, you want to understand where you really need to make sure things are locked up and where your data is coming from, you got to do an audit. And I think the average company, enterprise organization at this point has like 20 or 30 HR systems. It's absurd. And I think HiBob does some great work on consolidating systems. But it really is this kind of disjointed ecosystem where there's amazing point solutions. And when you buy a whole bunch of point solutions, you have a lot of different data sources. And so it means compliance across multiple systems. Where is the data stored? Where is the data transmitting to? Are you using something like a data warehouse? Have you, bought a people analytics point solution that then you're going to use as kind of your front end to disseminate the data? What are the regulations for each of those domains? Where do you have employees? Do you have employees in EMEA? Are they subject to GDPR? Do you have employees in California? There's different regulations there. And so kind of really taking this inventory of your systems, your employees. And then the other important thing is where the data is stored. So that definitely has a factor. If you're storing data in the EU, even if you don't have employees in the EU, maybe you have customers there, there's regulations that would apply to that. So it's really kind of complex in terms of figuring out what guidelines you're adhering to, but there are some best practices, right? And I would say, one, err on the side of not giving information to employees, managers, leaders, unless there is a clear business reason. And this is something that GDPR enforces. You can't collect the data unless there is a business reason, and you certainly should not be sharing it without a very clear, business reason. And so this has applied to a number of different domains where the US can collect something and EMEA doesn't necessarily collect it. So that's kind of one thing. Also, I always say transparency is great. And so this isn't about not being transparent. There are lots of ways to be able to aggregate trends and speak to them without needing to know that Maor, joined on this date and sits in this department and gets paid this much and identifies as, this gender. You don't need to know that all about Maor, but you can say, well, sales, these are the trends we're seeing in sales, or these are the trends we're seeing amongst Gen Zers. And those aggregate numbers are much easier to share without risking security and privacy, and are much more actionable because, gosh, if I'm about to lose Maor, all the efforts I can put in to save Maor are to save one person, right? And I'd rather programmatically build the right, make the right decisions to programmatically save, a swath of people in the future instead of focusing on one individual. So those are the kinds of questions I ask. I'll just add one more thing and then I'll pass the buck. But I've always said everybody sees something and nobody sees everything, right? And so that premise has kind of underlined all of the work I do with my clients, that we really should disseminate this data, right? That can happen without compromising security and privacy. And so it's really balancing those two pieces that is essential.
So not much to add after this great answer,
My
Hallie.
monologue.
So just say that internally we do exactly what you said. So first of all, I'm going side by side with legal. That's first of all, which every and other system we're going to have. We're going side by side with legal, making sure what are the local regulation, what we can do, what we cannot do, which information we can collect and cannot. It's even go to the recruiting system. These days, if you want to keep the candidate CV, you have to ask its consent to have it for more than, depends where, but maybe 2 years, 3 years, or any others. And the other one, of course, it's when we are sharing some information, if it's not designated people within the company that have permission to see it, it's usually going to be an aggregated information to make sure we're keeping the privacy of each and every employee that we have. Definitely, it's to put the effort in the right place. It's when you see some groups together and not individuals, because when you have those ad hoc situations, so yeah, you can react to them. But if you want to have a strategic plan or to know where you have some problems or where you have to do something or to any action item, whatever it is, so it's going to be by group or by some aggregated different attributes you have in the system. That's usually how we work. And yeah, that's about it. We're doing it department, generations, race, not race, gender, making sure pay gaps, of course, maintaining pay gaps. I don't know what else. Yeah, generations. Yeah, mainly those, I would say. Of course, regions and different sites, which goes without saying.
Yeah, you guys have a complex setup. I know that much just with your locations. I know the question to ask, but I want to see if I can launch a quick poll, kind of relevant to what we were talking about. Let me see if I can actually do this. Let's see. So this is on HR data utilization. Just kind of curious about how folks in the audit are actually tracking their data and using it. So I'll launch this, and I think it's gone out.
It is.
Maybe, I'm not even sure. Excellent, thanks. So, meantime, here's a question that maybe that I think is timely. What are the most critical metrics in people analytics that companies should focus on during economic downturns?
So we already talked about them, but I would say that definitely in these days, the three that I would highlight the most would be, first of all, turnover, and on top of turnover, I would say voluntary turnover, which is more important actually than turnover itself, to make sure why people are leaving us. The second one would be cost per hire. We need to backfill someone who left or we released from the company. We do want to understand how much does it cost for us. It's helped us to budget ourselves better for next year. And it's better for us to highlight the attrition risk that we have. In depends where it is. Maybe it's some location, maybe it's some department, maybe we have a problem with the manager itself. So in order to make sure that you could plan your workforce for the next year, I would say that turnover and cost per hire will be the two most important one. And time to hire as well, because as Haley said before, in different countries, there's different regulation. If you hire someone in Germany, it usually takes more than 3 months for him to resign from your previous company. So you have to plan ahead. So if I want to have someone, let's say in a quarter, or not say quarter, in 6 months from now, I probably have to start to recruit, because it will take me about 2 or 3 months to recruit him, and then additional 3 months until he will resign from. Usually he's got a early notice of 3 months. So all of those together helps you to better plan yourself. And when you want to be productive and make sure that you are strictly on your budget, I would say those two are the most important.
It's funny because I'd actually, I don't know if argue is the right word, but right now my clients could care less about hiring, could care less about turnover. Hiring's at an all-time low, turnover's at an all-time low. And so those two metrics, which are much more relevant in times of movement, right, and economic upswings and whatnot. Not that they become, irrelevant, but what I've been talking a lot with my clients about is organizational effectiveness, efficiency, productivity. And so one of the things we've been looking a ton at are things like span of control and shape of the organization. So do you have a top-heavy organization where there are too many people in, VP plus roles? Do you have it's one of my clients likes to call it a fat middle, right? Where you have too many folks actually in the middle and you need to push them down. You should have more doers instead of more middle managers. So there's kind of a lot of ways to look at that. Do managers have just 1 or 2 direct reports? Are you then getting the value out of a manager? Should they be having 3, 4, 5 direct reports in a particular domain? That's usually domain specific. So I never look at that metric across an organization, because sales, for instance, should have much larger spans, 7, 8, 9 direct reports. And HR, for instance, often has like real small spans, like 1 or 2 people per manager, because they're specialized niches. Like, I bet, Maor, your benefits team is not 15 people big, right? It is a couple people. And so that span makes a lot of sense for the function. So it's really kind of specific, but that's really where I've been focusing, is on thinking of those ways to, increase efficiency and effectiveness in this market. And Martin, if I think back to one of the questions you noted came from the audience early on, kind of what's the ROI, right? And I'm just gonna revisit the concept of efficiency and effectiveness when we get to that question, because they are relevant both for kind of optimizing the business, but also the value we bring.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes good sense. All right, a few more questions. So let's see. I'm just reading through it quickly. And this is I think specific, and I like it because we'll look at some examples out of this. What are some examples of impactful business transformations you witnessed that leveraged insights to help drive change? So things that have actually happened. You can maybe speak to a couple of examples where it worked.
Yeah, I
the
can
good
jump
stuff, basically, not where it broke.
I can jump in right there. I mean, there's far more learnings where it hasn't worked or hasn't been tried yet. But a couple of great use cases. I think workforce planning is a really nice one here. And so when you're thinking about the organization going forward, you've got to align what skills you already have with your budget, with your strategy, and the investments you're willing to make, right? And so if you take the data about your organization today, where there are gaps in skills, where there are gaps in leadership, and think about how to move your investments around. So if you need a flat budget, how are you going to plan for your workforce? If you, are growing and want to invest in a new strategy or a new product line, and you're going to make that additive, what do you need, right? And so that's where some of the data also can inform where the talent is to help fill those gaps. And so this is kind of the talent intelligence domain of people analytics. People call them different things, but I usually think about that as kind of the external market data. So there's some really great tools that basically scan all the LinkedIn profiles out there for all the skills, and they scan all the job descriptions out there for all of the, job postings out there to understand what the market is asking for, right? And then it can come back and you could say, well, I really need, I always use some tech skill, really need Java experts to move forward with this, and I just don't have enough. Where should I be recruiting, right? And that data can come back and say, you've got a whole bunch of Java experts in Detroit, Michigan, but you don't have a hub there. You haven't considered people there. Now you should go into and look at the cost of acquisition to hire somebody in that area. And how do I pull that all together to ultimately design proactively the org I want using kind of all of these data points that I have? So one good example.
Yeah, by the way, we used to use some LinkedIn tool, to do some pool assessment to the talent pool that we have in each and every country when we were looking, for maybe a low-cost country. So we kind of did that, try to assess what we have a talent pool to make sure that we can, if we can penetrate to this market, yes or no. Another example when we did something that worked well. So I will give something from compensation, by the way, not from analytics. So yeah, if you want to be proactive and make sure where you stand. So as Haley said before, so we did we did something internally where we mapped all the employees and make sure that we have a job. We did a job catalog first of all. So we built some infrastructure in order to us to make sure that we know how to assess our employees compared to the market and make sure we are competitive and we can attract the outside talent that we are looking for. So we put some infrastructure in place. First of all was the leveling. Then we did some job catalog, making sure that we have a global career architecture in place. So we know to assess each and every position in the company. And the final one was to build the matching to many surveys across the globe. So we're using Comtrix globally. We're using Radford. Some of you probably using Mercer as well, or it's Viran or any other data source. So we connected all those data sources into our system, making sure that we are pulling the right data, the right percentile. We did all the thinking about where we want to be, what is our, again, going back to the employer value proposition, and making sure that at the end, we do know exactly why we're paying as we are paying, where we are paying, and making sure that we are able to attract the right people and to retain them. And I'm glad to say that today we have bands within the system per each and every employee, which is something that took me a long time to do so. And I tried to do it twice in the previous companies, and it didn't always. We were kind of in the process, but it was really hard to finish those, to wrap it up. There's always, too many stakeholders that want to push it to put it to each and every side. So I think this one is another tool, compensation tool, that drives efficiency as well. Because when you want to recruit something, just like that, you have the information. You don't have to seek for new information. You have everything in system. You can see the outside, the external benchmark. You can see how your internal employees goes across this range. So it's make it much easier to decide how we're recruiting the next people. It's easy to decide relating to the workforce planning. We know exactly what is the cost per each and every new hire that we're going to have next year. We've got everything in the system, everything within the band. So it helps both to attract, both to make it more efficiency to work, and most important, to make sure that we are paying fairly across the company. Going back to the legislation, so in Israel these days, in the EU, the US, many countries embedded new legislation about gender gaps that you have to share with the employees. So that one helps us as well to make sure that we can compare each and every one to his specific role, and to make sure there's no big deviation between any gender or any other metrics that you want to check in this area.
Great example. I have a question to follow up on that one, but so I'll ask my question first. We also have a bunch coming in from the audience, and then the poll to run through real quickly. But just to riff off that question, so just as someone who's been a practitioner in my life, my career, where I've run recruiting organizations internally and have had to make cases for projects, it's not always easy. So in the project you just went through with the salary bands and mapping, that's a project you got to sell internally. You mentioned you tried it before and weren't able to. Was it I'm assuming it was probably a bit easier because the people you were talking to at HiBob actually work in the industry and kind of understand it. But how did you make the case? How did you kind of convince the stakeholders who were involved and the folks with the purse strings and everybody else who you had to pull in that this made sense to do? How did you actually sell it and make it work?
So in my case, internally, it was quite easy because in this case, HiBob has a model for that, has a compensation model, and part of it, it's the job catalog and and bands. So we are kind of trying to leading the way to make sure that we use our own product. So it was, and when a customer want to ask how you do that, they can just go in and say, hey, we want to Maor, come and help us to explain what you did. So internally, it was quite easy, but I think it was to make a business case. So at the end, you want to say, okay, I'm spending, my team is spending a lot of time benchmarking, getting asked for the TA, managers to say, listen, my employee says he doesn't earn enough. I've got him as someone who's want to leave. Too many cases that involve compensation. It's always quite easy, to highlight, hey, compensation is not quite good. This is the reason why everybody are leaving. This is the reason why people are not want to join the company. So make everybody understand what's in it for them at the end. That's where you can buy in people into this project. So first of all, it's the efficiency. We don't need to spend any time on those benchmarking. We can share this information with the TA team. We share this information with managers. We share this information with leaders. They have dashboard. They can see the pay gaps. They can, in just one click, they can see all of the groups. You see the comp pressure for each and every employee. When you go to a compensation cycle, you want to have some guidelines. You want to make sure that people make recommendation at the year end or whenever you do it during the year. You want to make sure that managers can have recommendation based on data. So it's make it easier for them to compare different employees. They can see it pretty easy. What is what's the relevant band, where the employee's position compared to that one, and based on those, to give the recommendation. And back to me at the end, I can make sure that those recommendations make some sense. I don't want to see someone, 1.5 comp ratio getting an increase of 20%. It doesn't make any sense. Maybe it's help us highlight some, maybe other discrepancies we have in the system. Maybe it doesn't map to the right job. Maybe it's not in the right level. So at the end, when you take all of those into account and when you show the other stakeholders what isn't for them, then it was easy. Then it's more easy. I would say that the most complicated area in this journey, it's the leveling. Make leveling and embed the leveling, and to make sure that leaders can take some good decision about their employees, because it's really easy to say, yeah, everybody are senior, yeah, those are director, yeah, they should be, and it's related to the span of control that Haley just mentioned before. So the leveling part was more difficult than the bands itself, because when you tell managers, yeah, you could see your employees' salaries and bands and compression, yeah, it's all fun. But when we ask them to decide whether Haley or myself is the senior one, and you cannot have all of us as senior, you cannot have all of us as top talent, then it gets hard, because it's a difficult decision that they have to take.
That makes sense. Sorry, coughing. Hallie, you're nodding a lot. Anything you want to add to that, or you look like you're really engaged with it?
I think Maor covered it.
Okay, great. Just making sure. So a couple of things. We have some audience questions as well as the poll. So we'll start with the poll first. So there's just a couple of questions on it. So how much of your workforce planning is currently data driven? And looking at the results, it's actually, so 0 to 25% is about a quarter of the respondents said yes. In fact, it breaks down evenly. So you got about a quarter of folks say 0 to 25, a quarter say 26 to 50, 51 to 75, and then 76 to 10. That's unusual. A clear breakdown. So it looks like it's across the map as far as who's data driven, who isn't. And not to disparage folks, but top end, bottom end, who's saying 0 and folks saying 100. I question both of those, but that's just me. You may not think it's data driven, but there's data coming and driving your decisions from some level. Maybe bad data. And I always question who, like no one can get 100%, no one can get an A+. I'm that kind of teacher. But yeah, so I suspect it's more in the middle. Next piece is, what are your primary sources of HR data? And the majority by far, HRIS, And then we have some folks using their recruitment platforms for data. And then financial systems came in. No one's using their performance management systems. No one's using employee surveys to get which. And this is primary sources, so it's probably a good thing. Employee surveys are your primary source, but that's the breakdown. And then as far as tools are using, about a third are using something dedicated like Tableau, Power BI, the real kind of data heavies. You got about 20% using Excel, and then half the respondents said custom built solutions. So whatever that means. But kind of let that one out there kind of vague. So there's the poll results. Nothing really shocking, I think. I am happy that the majority are using their HRAS. To me, that seems like a good place to start versus your payroll system. Yeah, but that's me. That's the poll. And then the questions have come in are a couple. So the first one is productivity and efficiency optics are great, but how do you boil these figures down to commercial and bottom line impact so it drives the business to make changes? We kind of just addressed that, but it's obviously a relevant one. Sounds like.
I have thoughts on this one.
Go for it.
So I said before, I'm going to come back to efficiency and effectiveness, right? And there is this tremendous desire to quantify the impact of people, right? And it's just not possible in so many areas, partly because we, as the analysts who are, generating these insights, typically do not have the ability to take action, right? We can hand off an insight, but we cannot control whether the decision maker for that function, for that capability, whatever it might be, for sales, for HRBPs, whatever it is, HR or non-HR, right? Whether they take action. And this is one of, I think, the challenges of the existing operating model when there are kind of people analytics capabilities is that they do not own the action that comes out of the insight, right? So because of that, the value that these types of insights bring, so let's look at productivity, let's look at efficiency, right? The value it brings is transparency into things they've never been able to see before. So if they never looked at, again, kind of, I'm going to use span of control. That should be widely adopted, but let's just use it as an example. If they've never looked at span of control and you are now showing them span of control and they have broader access and broader visibility and more regular visibility to span of control, they can do something about it because they can see it now and in a way they've never seen it before, right? Not only are we giving them transparency, we're usually giving it to them in a much faster way. So if they had it before in the past, now you talked about some of the solutions that folks could be using to visualize this data, right? Now they might have it in real time. So just think, and this is a good one, Maor, to pass over to you, compensation, right? Historically, you ran Radford reports or whatnot, surveys, once, twice a year, right? And so, well, a lot of people join and leave and join and leave and join and leave in between those times. And so now there are solutions that can give you real time kind of like where your compa ratio falls, where your pay equity is, right? In a way that if you did it once a year, you could be like, oh yes, we've achieved pay equity between men and women. And then a year later you come back and you're like, all of our men are getting paid more again. We fixed this last year. And then you fix it again and you come back a year later and the same trend has happened, right? It's because you're hiring more people. Maybe you're losing more women. Maybe you're bringing in more men as top leaders and you didn't realize that was going to throw things off so much, right? Like the real-timeness ability to look at this, there is great value there. So again, kind of that transparency into things you couldn't see before, efficiency in getting them more frequently, more easily, more quickly, right? That's really the value these types of insights bring. The actions that can come out of these insights can save boatloads of money, but it depends on the action. I have brought really interesting insights to many stakeholders who said, oh, that's nice. And I cried because I was like, you could do something about this and it would be amazing. And they said, well, we have these other priorities. And so we're just going to continue to focus on that. And so there's this change management component, right? There's this willingness to take action And some of that comes from trust, and mostly it comes from fluency. The more we do this, the more likely people will get used to us giving these insights and more likely to expect and utilize the insights. So little bit of a soapbox on the fact that we should not be expecting all the time to have a dollar amount we can turn up with it. I wish there was.
Yeah, makes sense. It makes sense. Yeah, it's I think about there's an old saying about advertising that this exact one said. He said half of my money I spend on advertising is really effective. The problem is I don't know which half. So how do you actually how do you actually measure it? Right. So yeah. All right, great. Maybe do you want to add to that, or you anything else to jump in with? I don't want to cut you
I think
off.
in summary, it's quite easy. If we go back to the turnover, cost of hire, so those are quite, straightforward. So nothing to add about those. But yes, mainly, as Hallie says, it's not always going to the dollar value. Even the opportunity to see and to understand and drive some strategic or any decisions from this new data, that's the great benefit.
Makes sense. Real quick, I'm going to jump to the second poll because this hour's flying by, which just means, at least for me, it's a good sign. I'm really enjoying the conversation. I don't want to forget the second poll. So real quick, and gotta find the right button. And so this is around data privacy and security. So it's launched. Just kind of curious what folks are dealing with in different areas and how they're actually tracking it. And I've created the poll because I spent a couple of years working for one of the big four accounting firms as a leader in their TA function, and compliance and privacy. I had dark hair when I got there. Within 6 months, the compliance lawyers turned it white. So I wish that was the joke. All right, but anyway, to get back into the question. So this came in from someone just now. So AI, because topic du jour certainly is. So implementing AI and automation in our HR processes without introducing bias comes up a lot in conversation. How do you tend to approach this challenge to minimize bias?
So there's an art and a science, right?
Oh, there's that 50-50 thing again.
Right. Well, but this is, I think, one of those cases in people, right, that is particularly relevant. So there are things that can be flat out automated, right? Like, let's automate a process, let's automate, you apply, and that means you get straight onboarded, and that generates a new profile, and that triggers an onboarding email to you, right? Like, that can happen, right? That's all AI, but that is automation. When it comes to actually like insights, right? You cannot generate the insight that there is high turnover in in R&D and have an action that AI can take straight from there, right? That's where the art comes in. And this is why I often say, like, people are not going away just because AI is helping. We're going to have those insights faster, more easily. It's going to be able to take in that data and give us that insight. But we're the ones who are still going to need to make the decisions and weigh the context and really pull that art into the science. So it is not to say that AI is not part of this, and it is not to say that AI is not the be all end all either. When it comes to bias, right? I would love, in my wildest dreams, I would love to have a predictor that takes all of the data and then spits out my employee rating, right? Okay, how many tickets did they close? Okay, how many bugs did they fix? Whatever it might be. And now, okay, that person performed. They were meets expectations. Like, every algorithm has bias. It's true. And there have been some amazing companies out there that have worked on this. I'm gonna blank on all the names right now, but some,
HiBob.
HiBob. I don't know if this is, but yeah, there's some great
and Udder.
and Udder. There's some great folks who have worked on this, and it is hard, right? It's not a nut that can easily be cracked, because if you train a model to tell you who performs well, you're training it on the ratings from the last cycle, right? And if those ratings for the last cycle were biased, because you and I are biased, right? Even though we try not to be, we are. Now that's just going to be perpetuated. So it's not like you can't totally de-risk it. If we ever come up with a way, I will celebrate. But again, that's why you have to pull in the art to the science. You may still use that algorithm. You may still say Maor exceeds expectations. That's what it spits out. And I'm Maor's manager, and I sit down with my manager and we say, you know, it says Maor's exceeding expectations, but I think that's because he's like doing a million tiny tickets and they're not high value things. And we actually think he doesn't have the skill to take on some of those more high value tickets, which is why it's showing up as like productive. But that's not real. Like he's really meets expectations, right? He's doing something, but he's not like there's opportunity. And so that's the art again, that goes with the science. So that's really how I think we at this moment in time need to handle bias that comes from AI. Again, knowing that processes can be automated hands off, and the things that really need decision making and human input, we do that.
Yes, I agree that I didn't meet any tool yet that can, replace those human decisions at the end. We do try to deal with this bias, in many other in many aspects. We try and we're having those once a quarter. I think TA team is doing this big, massive ordering all the manager to the non-bias. How do you recruit with not being biased to someone? Internally, as I said before, we are monitoring a lot of different items to make sure that we're not biased in any of terms. But yet, regarding to performance, I never used any AI tools you mentioned. It's interesting to see one, but I do believe it won't be accurate, as you say, because it doesn't take into account those soft questions that you can put in. So mainly today, dealing with bias, it's something that we're doing, actively by monitoring different types of attributes that we don't want to see. Making sure that about compensation was a really good example. That's what we're always monitoring. We're actually monitoring each and every offer that we give to employee and make sure that we didn't offer some less for a female than a male. Just want to make sure that we are not biased on that as well. Because, there's many, I wouldn't get into that. Maybe says that men do more negotiation than women or the other way around, whatever you want to take it. So we do want to make sure that we are doing the stuff as we think it should be. But didn't find any tool yet. But Haley, if you find something, please let me know.
I will.
Hear my work.
I kind of worry too that because there will be managers, unfortunately, who will just take the numbers and use them. They won't put the art in because there's a default mechanism there quite often where people will start doing that, and I worry that may create if you're familiar with the Peter principle, where people get promoted, they do a good job at one level, they get promoted till eventually they're promoted to one level beyond where they should be working. Like they should have stayed at the one level, but then they get, well, good, they did well here, so they must be great at this, and they fail. It's called the Peter principle, and it's a classic. And I worry that this automation may actually put that in steroids, where the system starts saying, well, they did well, push them up till they're failing. Through no fault, they've been pushed up to a point where they can't do their job anymore. So that's a side note because I fret a lot in my life. On the poll, we're getting a bunch of results, which is great. Let's run through that. So how concerned are you about data privacy when handling HR data? So we have 0 not concerned, 14% slightly, 14 moderately, 43 very concerned. It's a very good reaction, and 29 who are extremely concerned. Again, they're very worried about how do they actually data privacy, HR data, that kind of line. What happens there? Let's see, data protection. Wow, everyone who responded is under GDPR. Not a shock. European audience, global companies. I do know a lot of U.S. organizations are going more and more to GDPR just because it's stricter, and it seems to make sense. We can probably speak to that too. I see Haley kind of nodding rapidly. And what security measures does your organization implement to protect HR data? 29% encryption, data encryption, 43% access controls. No one's doing regular audits. 14% employee training, and 14% data anonymization. So no audits. Interesting. And then what is the biggest challenge your organization faces ensuring HR data security? So no one said limited budget. It's a good sign. 14% lack of expertise, 43% rapid technological changes, and 43% ensuring employee compliance. So it looks like it's the technology and the people who are screwing up, making sure data stays secure in both directions. So there's that. just a bit of context for us. And then another question that's come in. Our current HR analytics software is too complex and not user-friendly. Are there ways to simplify it?
Well, I'll tackle this, and I can also probably give a nod to HiBob, and I'll let Maor speak more to that. But there's really this broader debate in the space: build versus buy. Do you build a separate people analytics technology in systems like Tableau, Power BI? Do you buy a point solution like Visier, One Model, Cruncher, or do you consolidate, right? And so that might be something like HiBob or Workday, or kind of many of the spaces out there. So these are kind of the options to get into this. There's complexities and challenges with each of them, and pros and cons as well. So things you're sacrificing with consolidated solutions that you might get in point solutions, but then there's integration challenges, right? And if you build, then you've got a lot of resources, right? I can go down the rabbit hole, but what I will say is reach out to me. I'll talk through the solution you have with you, how you already have, and we can talk through ways that you might consider simplifying it or moving in a different direction that is better for your organization. So
Yeah, so
note to anonymous attendee. Ping Hallie for help. Sorry, I didn't cut it.
Yeah, so just in a minute. So yeah, I think there's no easy solution for that, because at the end it is complex, because there's a lot of data. You need to think about the metrics that you want to measure. You think to understand what is it for the company, what is it for, how does it meet the business objective, what do you actually want to measure. Sorry. So I could say, I know me personally, I'm using HiBob. We have this dashboard of analytics. It's make it pretty easier, but yes, there's pros and cons. I do know that if you go to a point solution, you might have more complex metrics. You can define them easier for you. You can make customization as you wish. But when you put it in the scale, you have to decide whether or not you want to go with something which is more like easygoing, but maybe don't have the whole solution that you would like, or those point solution. And as Ellie said, she probably can take you all the different solutions better than myself. I used to work with Tableau in my previous company. It was complex. We had someone who was dedicated only for building those metrics to make sure you pull the data from the different data sources. So you've got this one-stop shop as HiBob, and you got this designated point solution as others, but there's no easy way on that one. It takes time. It's easier when you get it at the end, when you have the dashboard that you want to see, then it became easier. But just to build it and to understand what you want to measure and how you measure it, that takes time.
Yeah, trade-off.
I think it's worth the time. I think I agree with you. It's a bit of an investment of time. All right, we're running up on time here. Speaking of time, I like how I just did that segue. That wasn't even intentional. But let's do a quick closing remark. I just want to just thank everyone in general for attending. This has been a great conversation. I want to keep going, frankly, but time being what it is, and we can keep this rolling forward. As far as for the attendees and folks who couldn't make it but who signed up, we have a bunch of those who wanted the recording. There will be a recording coming out very soon. We're going to push out a follow-up poll to attendees just to see a sense for what you thought of it. Other questions, we want to make sure that you can go to contact Hallie and Maor. Maybe quickly, what are the best ways for people to reach you with questions?
Yep. So for me, definitely find me on LinkedIn, Hallie Bregman. I also have a website, thebregmangroup.co, C-O, no M at the end. And one last, Hallie@thebregmangroup.co is my email. So any of those ways you can get to me, but definitely please reach out.
Yeah, so LinkedIn will be the best way to reach me out. And if you need anything from HiBob, I'll be more than happy to assist as much as I can. And any other question, feel free to reach out.
Yeah, and we'll make sure to have all this, in a follow-up too, so that you can click on the link and get to it. No need to write it down, but we'll make sure we had that out there. Again, I really enjoyed this conversation. We'll have more materials coming out. We'll have follow-ups happening. We're going to go through the transcript and find some interesting pieces to kind of play out with and build some more kind of thought leadership and white papers around some of these topics, because they're really interesting. And the audience obviously had some good questions and they were engaged, so this matters. And we want to carry it forward. So again, I want to thank everyone for attending. Hallie, Maor, thanks for your time. I know it's valuable. This means a lot to us. It was super helpful. I really liked the conversation. So I'll leave it with that. And again, any questions for Maor, Hallie, to reach them. For myself, it's Martin at Udder, UDDER.rocks, because Udder rocks. That's us. And you can find me on LinkedIn too, obviously. I'm all over the place. And we look forward to talking with you more. And again, thanks for the time. Enjoy your days.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
everyone. Wait. So yeah, now you're being recorded too. So you know, for posterity's sake.
I shouldn't say anything too naughty.
Probably not. Yeah, that's probably a good idea in general. No webinar, but yeah.
That's fair. That's fair.
Yeah, but yeah, for sure when there's a recording happening. All right, just waiting on. Oh, Maor, hello.